Hello everyone, this is Just Restart, and we have some new rumors here. They're certainly going to stir up a great deal of conversation. There are a variety of implications here. We are now hearing that Nintendo is planning an Ocarina of Time HD as part of Zelda's 40th anniversary celebration. Now, this rumor is coming from a place that has also suggested we'll still be getting the bigger reimagined Ocarina of Time later down the road, so if this part proves true, then that would also imply maybe the other part is going to be true. Maybe. We're going to dive further into that, but then also, we're hearing about a Super Metroid Remake by Mercury Steam, the team that made both Metroid Dread and Metroid Samus Returns, and supposedly we are to get news on this project this year. But these rumors are coming from you-know-who. Or if you don't know, I'll tell you now. They're coming from Nash Weedle. Now hold on a second. I understand a lot of people right now are very untrusting of Nash Weedle because there was not a February Nintendo Direct. However, there's something that people need to understand that it feels like a lot have been missing. The rumor was always February or March. We're just in the beginning of March. And actually recently Nash Weedle highlighted how during these live streamed discussions that are on Attack the Backlog's channel, in other words, you can go back and check the receipts yourself, when these things were said, it was talked about how there's still an uncertainty because there's a lot of movement and chaos here. And it's even brought up how a lot of different things have occurred, like the Nintendo Treehouse, the Xenoblade Chronicles X Switch 2 Edition announcement, the Pokemon Presents, that may have contributed to some of this chaos. In other words, I'm simply stating that the rumor has not been disproven yet. The rumor is that we're supposed to get a Direct in either February or March, but more importantly, this Direct is supposed to have the announcement of the next 3D Mario to come out this year and the next Monolith Soft announcement, and no, I do not believe that Xenoblade Chronicles X Switch 2 Edition would count. So I'm still waiting to see if that's going to come true. If that comes true, then I would say the rumor is true. If not, then, well, yeah, it would then be false. So while Nash Weedle did indicate that more of his sources were leaning towards February at the time, March was always a possibility, and just to show my own receipts here, on February 5th, after we got the partner showcase, I was talking about things were going on, and just listen to this clip here. To get release dates for these games that may end up coming out in summer seems like too quick of a turnaround, but a Direct in March where they announce Yoshi and the Mysterious Book coming out April or May, this coming out June or July, this coming out June, July, or August, actually makes a little bit more sense to me, just from getting the release dates out in a Direct presentation perspective. Now, from everything we're seeing right now, if I have to say when we get this supposed general Direct, I am leaning towards March at this point. Why am I leaning towards March? Well, we look at, for example, Resident Evil Requiem. With Resident Evil coming out at the end of February, and it having its spot during this Direct, I think it would be really weird for Nintendo to turn around a couple weeks later, have another General Direct, and then not mention Resident Evil or mention it again. So based off that, it just kind of seems like they're just not going to have another Direct in this month of February outside of the Pokemon Presents. But March I still think makes a lot of sense for us to get another Direct, and by then it will make a lot more sense to give us a release date for Yoshi and the Mysterious Book and Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and Splatoon Raiders. So as you see, I was already talking about, at the beginning of February, that March made more sense even though this rumor was indicating both as possibilities. I was very consistently leaning towards March, even though obviously, like many others, I would hope it would come sooner, but that has not happened. That all said, we have these other rumors here that may or may not come true, take them with a grain of salt, but they do have some significant implications and could help for this year of 2026 to be a very interesting one from Nintendo. So let's dive even further into that today. Now before going further, let me simply point out I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, I would appreciate your subscription. So yes, Nash Weedle has put out his latest Partida Zero, where he talked about some things that he's been hearing from different sources. He mentions that Bayonetta is on the way, Devil May Cry are on the way, those aren't too crazy, he's been talking about Bayonetta for a while. So that's something to keep in mind, but it's not talked about how it's going to be announced soon or anything imminent like that, so that's really all there is to say on those. The bigger ones are the Metroid and Zelda thing, so let's talk about Super Metroid first here. Super Metroid getting remade makes a lot of sense. It's a series classic. For some, it's considered to be the greatest Metroid game ever, or some will even say the greatest video game ever, period. So it would be a great game to be remade. Mercury Steam did a fantastic job with Metroid Samus Returns, and they got even better with Metroid Dread. So I have high hopes for a Super Metroid Remake here. It really is a no-brainer that Mercury Steam would continue developing 2D Metroid. Both games were successful, especially Metroid Dread, the most successful Metroid game to date. Even with the release of Metroid Prime 4, we're not sure how Prime 4 is going to sell long-term, but so far, Dread is still the best-selling game in series history. So of course, Mercury Steam should be continuing to develop the 2D Metroid games. They have a lower budget than the 3D Metroid games, so there's more profit to be made there. So at least in the case of Dread, most likely was more profitable than Metroid Prime 4, so obviously you would want to continue. Now, where I have some concerns, it's not about the remake itself. I think this would be fantastic. I would love to replay Super Metroid with modern visuals and some additional changes, maybe a little bit of extra content. We saw Mercury Steam add some new content, like a new boss fight and stuff, to Samus Returns, the remake of Metroid 2. So I'd be very curious to see what they could add for Super Metroid. Also, Samus Returns isn't even the first Metroid remake that added new content. We also have Zero Mission that came out back on the Game Boy Advance, the remake of Metroid 1, that had the Zero Mission, where Samus was exploring around in her Zero suit. So that was some pretty cool stuff. I would love to see what they could bring to the table in terms of new content to Super Metroid. But the concern is, Yoshio Sakamoto, the Metroid creator, the man behind the story of the 2D Metroid games, he's getting up there in age. He's likely getting close to retirement. If they are working on a Super Metroid now, when would we see the next new 2D Metroid, Metroid 6, to follow Metroid Dread, that would continue the story? Likely a few years from now. Just looking at the average gaps here, we're probably waiting 4 to 5 years before the next 2D Metroid. Maybe it happens a little bit sooner. Maybe Yoshio Sakamoto has already written out that storyline and they have that in mind. But it's just something to keep in mind here, because if he's stepping down, Mercury Steam just doing a Metroid remake is a little concerning there. However, maybe there is a significant expansion to the story here, and this project here is going to be used as a little bit of a training up for whoever is going to follow in Sakamoto's footsteps, with carrying at least the 2D Metroid story forward. Now, supposedly we would be getting an update on this in this year, so if that turns out to be true, that would be some pretty cool stuff. Now, the other big thing, and this is one that I think will be more contentious, Ocarina of Time HD. The idea would be to take the Ocarina of Time 3DS version and upscale that to HD. That would be Nintendo's release for the 40th anniversary, but as I stated earlier, as Nash explained in his Partida Zero, as he understands it, this would be separate from the big reimagined remake project we've been theorizing about for the last couple years. But it would also imply they would still be a ways off, potentially at this point even coming out after the next new 3D Zelda. But he also mentions, from what he's talked about with a few different people, as it's being understood at this point in time, this project would be treated as a new version of the story, a reboot, a retelling or reimagining, probably something more along the lines of what we have seen from Capcom's Resident Evil remakes 2, 3, and 4, or Square Enix's Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, which would be very exciting and perhaps is part of Nintendo's plan, as I actually talked about a few weeks ago, to get not just a mainline 3D Zelda team to make the new open-air Zeldas, but also a team that's making these reimagined remakes as well, so we have more consistent Zelda releases, similar to what we're seeing with both Final Fantasy and Resident Evil. So this Ocarina of Time 3D HD thing is confirmed this year. I would say that doesn't actually necessarily take away from the possibility of the Bigger Boy remake. Actually, going back to both Final Fantasy and Resident Evil, we've seen HD versions of the original Final Fantasy VII and also Resident Evil 4 remasters before, a little bit later, the remakes, the reimagined remakes, are announced. So one does not necessarily take away from the other. We even have comments from Nate Bildorf of Nintendo talking about how the existence of Wind Waker on Nintendo Classics does not take away from the possibility of future remasters in the future. So that's officially from a Nintendo executive. So if this rumor proves to be true, I'm just saying, don't use it as a moment to doom and gloom. It doesn't mean we won't be getting the bigger reimagined Ocarina of Time remake down the road, Actually, it would be suggestive that it is going to be a more ambitious project that's not just a visual enhancement, but it would be taking even longer. Now, focusing on just the idea of getting an upscaled HD version of Ocarina of Time 3D for the Switch this year, honestly, not even sure I'm going to buy it. I mean, I'll wait and see until it's announced. Maybe it's more enhanced than what's being let on. It kind of depends, but I do think that just enhancing a 3DS game, or rather a 3DS remaster of an N64 game, and by enhancing, just upscaling to HD, in other words, basically what we could see on an emulator, like on Citra or Dolphin or something like that, that's not exciting to me. That's not really anything that feels all that new, and I don't think that would be worth a full $60 price, or even $70 if they dare to go that high. The rumor just suggests this would be coming out for Switch. It was not said for Switch 2 specifically, so I assume this would be kind of like a Mario Galaxy 1+2 sort of situation. But the thing about that is that at least Galaxy 1 and 2 were a combo pack together, not one game, but two, and these were Nintendo Wii games, not Nintendo 64 games. And even if you want to count Ocarina of Time 3D as a 3DS game, the 3DS is still lesser than the Wii, and it's still at its root an N64 game, just enhanced on 3DS. So personally, I think one game that's more behind the times than the Galaxy games, that I do not think has aged that well, just upscaling it to HD when you already have the N64 version of Ocarina of Time on Nintendo Classics, I think it's a little bit of a tone-deaf decision if that's all there is to it. However, I'll also say, if it's more than just this, that's a little promising. Let's talk about how we heard about the Mario Galaxy 2 remaster. We were talking about it for a while. It did come out for Mario's 40th anniversary. That rumor proved to be true. But it wasn't just Mario Galaxy 2, it was also Mario Galaxy 1+2. So maybe there's more to this than just a upscaled port of Ocarina of Time 3D. Maybe this would also include Majora's Mask, and maybe it could include even more than that. While I would be a little bit more inclined to give a combo pack of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D in HD a try, I think, to be honest, what would be even better would be a triple pack: Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess. All 3 HD versions in one package. Will Nintendo actually do that? I'm sure many people would be skeptical, but we did get Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy for 3D All-Stars for the 35th anniversary. There is some precedent there. A triple pack of those games would make a lot of sense in my opinion, and would be a great way to showcase Green Tunic Link, to set people up to be inspired to watch the live-action Zelda movie that, from what we've seen of the leaks, is going to be portraying Green Tunic Link, re-showing that iconic version of Link. So I think that would make a lot of sense, and at least if it's a twin pack, I think most people will find that to be manageable. Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Twilight Princess probably is, a little bit of hopium there. But just Ocarina of Time, I don't think it would be worth it. Unless, again, it's a more ambitious remastering, which, from the sounds of it, it's being talked about as a port, and they're still working on the bigger reimagined project to come out a few years from now. And that's all under the assumption this rumor is true. We'll see. But what's interesting about all this stuff, the Nintendo Direct in March, the 3D Mario thing, the Monolith Soft thing, the Super Metroid Remake thing, and this Ocarina of Time 3DS HD version, if all of this is confirmed this year, I think that gives us a lot more clarity on just how reliable Nash Wheetle sources are. So we'll see on that. But I also just want to point out, because I've seen this talking point online, and it's wrong, so I'm going to clarify here. Yes, Nintendo does celebrate Zelda's anniversaries in the 5-year increments. Yes, there are significant announcements. For the 35th anniversary, we got the name drop for Tears of the Kingdom. For the 30th anniversary, we got that huge E3 focus of Breath of the Wild, where we got hundreds of hours of Great Plateau gameplay, and yes, the name drop of Breath of the Wild. And then in the 25th anniversary, yeah, Skyward Sword came out that year, but they also still made sure to showcase the future of Zelda, or the potential of Zelda's future on the new hardware, with that Zelda U tech demo that looks awesome. I'm not mentioning all the different things that were announced and came out for each anniversary. I'm focusing on just how each anniversary over the last 3 big ones was used to tease the future of Zelda. And if we are getting like a Zelda pack of some kind for the 40th anniversary, that's fine. I think that would be a suitable release if it's more than just one. But I also think Nintendo should probably tease the future Zelda, whatever that is. Be it the reimagined remake, be it a new open-air Zelda. Whatever that is, I think they need to tease it. We do have a pattern of them teasing it for the bigger anniversaries. We'll see how things pan out. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.